At 77, time for me to retire. Thank you, WWE Universe. Then, now, forever. Together. Exactly 1 year ago, that tweet changed the landscape of WWE forever. Vince McMahon had stepped down from the throne, and in came a trio with a new vision that took over. Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan being co-CEOs along with Triple H being the sole head of creative. This felt surreal at the time. Nobody thought Vince would ever step away, and many wrestlers have come out to say he probably would have died sitting in that chair in Gorilla during Monday Night Raw, or any of the other shows. Don't get me wrong, Vince was great, back when he was forced to be great, or the business would tank. The Attitude Era, competing with Monday Night Nitro. Nowadays, with $1 billion deal here, millions of dollars here, he couldn't care less about the fans and did whatever amused him. Seeing that tweet rejuvenated wrestling fans and their hope in a better product since Triple H had already proved his booking skills in NXT. The first pay-per-view of the Triple H era was SummerSlam. Well, kind of. It was a Vince McMahon booked show, but a Triple H produced show. Working with what he was given, Triple H delivered to say the least. This was a very good show, and was way better than it looked on paper. Starting the show, Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair went out and culminated their one-year story in a banger of a match. But that wasn't even the best part. What happened next proved to me Vince was officially gone, and it was Hunter's playground now. While Bianca was celebrating holding her championship proud standing on the ropes, out comes a returning Bayley. Huge pop, but she didn't come alone as out came a returning Dakota Kai, who was fired by Vince and his people earlier that year. A few moments later, Io Shirai, now named Io Sky, made her long-awaited debut alongside the two returning superstars. If I'm not mistaken, it was around that time there were rumors that Io was basically out the door. But thank God Hunter came in at the right time because she's the real deal. The three confronted Bianca, and then Hunter chose to turn Becky back into a babyface, and a breath of fresh air was instilled in the women's division once again. The rest of the matches were great, and the end of the show saw yet again another match between the Beast Brock Lesnar and the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns for the WWE Undisputed Universal Championship. Nobody was looking forward to this, to be honest, even with the stipulation of a last man standing in place, but they proved everyone wrong. A really fun match. Probably the second best match between them since WrestleMania 31 back in 2015. SummerSlam really opened my eyes, and I realized how much better WWE was about to become. Now we were on the road to Clash at the Castle. Throughout the weeks, we saw some good television. That's something that's clearly changed from the Vince era. Each Raw and SmackDown is much better than the ones from a couple years ago. There's some okay TV episodes, but for the overall year, it's been pretty enjoyable. There's better wrestling every week, and we see less rematches, which was a huge issue I had while watching Vince McMahon produce shows week after week. Lately, I've seen a bit more rematches, but it's far less than the amount before Triple H took over. The thing I love about Triple H is that he didn't even wait a single moment to fix and change the product. Those first months of TV were filled with return after return after return from fired fan favorites. I remember genuinely being excited to see who's going to show up this week. He reintroduced Karrion Kross and Scarlett as a main threat when they attacked Drew in the lead up to his title match against Roman Reigns. While he hasn't lived up to that hype yet, it was a shocking moment, and definitely one of my favorites. Most of the returns started out hot but simmered down, which isn't the best but one of the better booked returns. Chelsea Green has really thrived in this new era. Returning as a Karen, she makes the tag division recently actually watchable, and is great in her new gimmick. Speaking of the women's tag titles, it was around this time in August that Triple H had to undo the damage from the whole Sasha, Naomi, and Vince conflict, when there was literally no champion for months since it was vacated and basically thrown to the curb. Triple H tried his best with this division, and unfortunately the injury bug, a lack of teams to begin, and wrestlers, cough cough Ronda Rousey giving the company basically a 1-month notice, is still something Hunter is trying to overcome. Hopefully with Chelsea and Sonya as champions, the division will flourish. There were a few title matches on Clash at the Castle, Roman versus Drew, Liv versus Shayna, but the show-stealing match had to be the 5-star classic between Gunther and Sheamus. Just wow, what a showcase. This match, and really Gunther's entire reign as Intercontinental Champion, has brought so much prestige back to this old-school title, that lost a lot of its value over the last decade. Triple H's biggest accomplishment throughout this era has been the resurgence of mid-card championships. While the WWE Championship was being held hostage on SmackDown, Raw saw the United States title take its place with people like Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, and Austin Theory fighting over it in the main event. The Money in the Bank was even used to cash in on the title, something that's never been done before. And while it sort of diminished the value of the briefcase, the United States Championship never felt bigger. Triple H taking the briefcase off of Austin Theory was a good idea, because it was actually holding him back, as we saw him become a much more aggressive and entertaining heel in the weeks that followed. The title should go to someone else now, but we'll talk about him later in this video. This past year, the mid-card titles have been treated much better and feel like a big deal once again. The first month set the standard for the following year. During the show, we also saw a long-awaited heel turn by Dominic Mysterio, where he destroyed his father and Edge, aligning himself with the Judgment Day. This is a pivotal moment in the Triple H era because this group has been a focal point every week for the entire year, whether it's Raw, SmackDown, and even NXT recently. Triple H turned the Judgment Day around and created a monster group. Clash at the Castle was such a fantastic international show. Triple H and the company decided to give other fans across the globe similar experiences. Shows in Canada, Puerto Rico, and Saudi Arabia, just to name a few, and likely many more on the way, as there's internal talks for more events in places such as India and Australia. Not only does this provide a fresh feel to the crowds who are much more enthusiastic than fans in the United States, it brings more attention and eyes to the company. A new fan base and new market does wonders for a business, like Triple H says. Gotta do what's best for business. The next pay-per-view was Extreme Rules, but before that we saw a massive rebrand down in NXT. Before Triple H took over, his baby was NXT and was forced to step away for a bit because of his medical condition, and in came the devil himself, Vince McMahon, along with his stooges, who tore the whole place down and started throwing colors everywhere. Once Triple H came back, but this time in an even higher position of authority, he called for the brand to somewhat revert back to its older ways. The second month of this new dawn in wrestling was pretty fun. During this time, Triple H really showed us he cared about our opinions because finally, the maximum male models, more specifically Max Dupree, was dead. He did it. He undid whatever the hell that was that Vince decided to do as a repackage. Amazing decision from the new head of creative because he's the most over star right now, literally occupying 3 of the top 5 spots for t-shirt sales. It took time for the fans to get fully behind him after this reverting back to LA Knight, but it was for the better. The lead up to Extreme Rules was fun, and what I liked about this Extreme Rules in comparison to the ones in the past, it truly felt extreme. Every match on this card has a stipulation on it. We saw the Brawling Brutes defeat Imperium in a good old-fashioned Donnybrook match. Ronda Rousey make Liv Morgan pass out in an Extreme Rules match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Karrion Kross win his first main roster pay-per-view match against Drew McIntyre in a strap match. Bianca Belair retain her women's title against Bayley. In a ladder match, Finn Balor force Edge to say "I quit," and Matt Riddle beating Seth Rollins by submission inside the Fight Pit match with Daniel Cormier as a special guest referee. That's a solid card. Comparing that to the one in 2021, the only stipulation match we got was an Extreme Rules match between Finn Balor and Roman Reigns. This shows how lazy Vince was. He couldn't even add stipulation to a pay-per-view that was all about special match types. And I can't forget to mention what happened at the end of the show. Bray Wyatt making his return after weeks of QR code hints, and it was a sight to see. I hope we see another Extreme Rules event this year, because I had a lot of fun watching last year's. One thing I noticed at this point of the new era, the commentary changed quite a lot. It felt less forced. The commentators did their job as naturally as possible, and lots of banned words by Vince McMahon were no longer in effect. The constant voice of Vince in their headsets being gone played a huge role in this new atmosphere at the announcer's booth. The road to Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia was set, and it felt like a true pay-per-view. These Saudi money grab events never truly seemed to be fully integrated to the product, instead a few one-off big matches being the sole focus of the show. That's another fix in my opinion Triple H had made for the better. That wasn't the only thing Triple H had fixed during this time either. The overused brand versus brand. What color is better feud? 5-on-5 Survivor Series elimination match was dead at this point. Pointless match. Seen it over and over again throughout the years and made no sense in the current era. Triple H announced WarGames coming to the main roster instead. This is something that would have never happened if Vince was still in charge, because in Vince's mind, if it wasn't a company creation, there's no way it'll be on their television. This is a great decision by Hunter. WarGames delivered, and the stories it told were even better. I'd like to add the fact that during the build to Survivor Series, a new heel version of Nikki Cross, who would be on one of the teams, won the 24/7 championship and threw it away in the trash. This is so underrated when looking back at this past year, but we all need to be thankful we're not still seeing 10 to 15 minutes of 24/7 nonsense on our television screens every week. Back to the WarGames pay-per-view, though. To start the show, we saw the women's WarGames match where Becky Lynch returned to team alongside her rival-turned-friend Bianca Belair against the women who injured her months ago. The match was great and included some innovative offense. The second WarGames match featured the Bloodline, and it was storytelling at its finest. I won't go into detail about the Bloodline because that's another 2-hour YouTube video, but the Bloodline really carried this match, and the entire year to be honest, which I'll mention throughout this video, but not as much because I'm gonna save it for a future Bloodline recap video. But yeah, we saw Sami Zayn stay loyal to the group and sacrifice another run with his frenemy in Kevin Owens, and the Bloodline stood strong during the final shot. This was something new to the casual fans, and it was the most watched Survivor Series ever in the history of the company, which shows that WarGames is indeed a draw. There was no December pay-per-view this year, and that was fine to be honest. More time to build to my favorite time of the year, Royal Rumble season. Every year the winners become more and more obvious by this time, and it was no different. Cody was the favorite to win the men's match, and nobody besides Rhea stood a chance to win the women's Rumble. This didn't matter to me because I was more curious on how Triple H was going to book his first ever Royal Rumble pay-per-view. But before we get to the Rumble, there was a special episode of Raw for the 30th anniversary of Monday Night Raw. The company brought in a boatload of legends to help celebrate this huge milestone for the Red brand. And in doing so, plenty of current stars were also highlighted. What I liked about this show was the fact that the legends blended well with the current stars, and it was a better throwback episode than the ones Vince produces every other year. I loved the entire D-Generation X and Imperium segment and all the Legends segments, quite frankly. There was also a great Bloodline segment dubbed The Trial of Sami Zayn. Triple H has consistently put on good Bloodline segments weekly, and this was one of the strongest ones. Segments like this are what make WWE different. This was so well done, and kept the crowd invested the whole time without anyone throwing a single punch. Back to the Rumble though. I thought he did good in booking it, better than most of the Rumbles in the last decade. It was very enjoyable. Hunter did something unique though in starting the event with one of the Royal Rumble matches and not main event with the other. At first I was very iffy on this, but it made sense after watching the entire show, and I'll get to that part in a bit. But the men's Rumble started the show, and the first two entrants were Sheamus and Gunther. Wow. I didn't expect this, and it got me hyped again. Once again bringing up the point of the prestige instilled in mid-card title holders and the title itself, Gunther was a massive focal point in this match, and it shows how much Triple H cares about those championships. I don't want to take a while talking about the Rumble match, but fast forward, Cody enters at number 30 and wins as expected. Solid. The Women's Rumble happened a little bit after, and it was basically the Rhea Ripley show, entering the match right away, and actually this threw me off a bit. I said the Rumble winners were obvious, but it seemed like this was a way to have someone else win because Rhea was in the beginning, and she had a rib injury from earlier. A good swerve, and I liked it. I'd also like to mention the greatest Triple H rehire once again, Chelsea Green. She returned here. And a new version of Asuka. We know Triple H loves Asuka, and this was his idea to reinvent her and bring back her aura from her golden days as women's champion in NXT. The new killer clown look and character homage from her time in Japan was perfect, and there was a huge pop. Rhea did still end up winning, and it was one of the better women's Rumbles I've seen. Now we got to the main event. Storytelling at its finest. After Roman Reigns defeated Kevin Owens and retained his title, he demanded the Bloodline, including Sami, to attack Owens to prove a point. Zayn refused to hit Owens with a steel chair, and instead did the exact thing to Roman instead. The rest of the Bloodline, with no surprise, destroyed Zayn and Owens during the final moments. The carnage was too distressing for the live crowd, and Roman Reigns was showered with chants of "F you Roman." This is long-term storytelling. One thing I love about Triple H's booking style. We've seen it in NXT with Ciampa and Gargano or Raquel and Dakota and such, but this was something different. If Vince was still in charge, I doubt Sami would still be involved at this point, and he would never turn into this hot of a babyface for the company. Triple H just gets it. It continued to Elimination Chamber in Montreal, the home of Sami Zayn, where he challenged his former leader. Before that match, we saw two incredible chamber matches, and I really had fun watching both Theory and Asuka win their respective matches. Going back to Sami and Roman though, this was a phenomenal match, and the outcome saw Zayn lose to Reigns, but it's okay because long-term storylines are a thing now, and he'll get his revenge at WrestleMania. After Elimination Chamber, it was finally WrestleMania time, the biggest wrestling event of the year. Hunter has wrestled on it more times than you can count on your hands, but how is he going to do booking it? Across the 2 nights there were more than a dozen matches, so I'm not going to cover all of them, but top to bottom both nights I'd say it was a great WrestleMania. Triple H did not disappoint creating this card, and it birthed 2 5-star matches with many others inches away from the perfect rating. Night 1, the top matches in my opinion were Rhea beating Charlotte, Logan versus Seth, that saw Seth overcome the loudmouth celebrity turned boxer turned wrestler, Ray versus Dom, with Ray finally shutting his son up, and Kevin and Sami winning the tag team championships and getting their long-awaited revenge on the Bloodline as a whole. Night 2, I think the matches that delivered the best were the triple threat for the IC title between Gunther, Drew, and Sheamus, Bianca surprisingly beating Asuka and Roman Reigns with an even bigger surprise retaining against the heavy favorite in Cody Rhodes. Now that I look back, I think Triple H made the right decision in keeping the championships with the tribal one. It's a hot take, but either way this WrestleMania did not disappoint. Coming out of Mania, I feel like Triple H really turned the company around from Vince's vision to his own. Most storylines culminated, and it was a brand new slate once again. This was clear to me when a draft was announced. Another small but effective change is having the draft after Mania instead of a random month in the fall right before or after Survivor Series. Lots of NXT names were called up during this draft, and I was confident in Triple H's ability to actually use most of them, unlike Vince, and have a direction for them soon after they debut. After the draft, just days later, Backlash in Puerto Rico happened. Once again, another banger event. With a handful of Puerto Rican talents on the card, the San Juan crowd was electric. Bianca Belair retained her title against Io Sky, with the crowd turning in Sky's favor. Rhea Ripley kept her title against a fan favorite that night in Zelina Vega. And Bad Bunny won a street fight against Damian Priest. One of my favorite events of the past year, and I think it's a top contender for pay-per-view of the year. After Backlash, we headed to Night of Champions, which was another Saudi Arabia event. Originally, this was supposed to be King and Queen of the Ring, but was changed. I liked that Triple H wanted to make it a full pay-per-view, but Roman hitting 1,000 days was more important, so it'll most likely happen at a later date. During Night of Champions, a major new top title was introduced. Triple H had created a secondary top title for Monday Night Raw because Roman had both hostage over on SmackDown. Seth Rollins defeated AJ Styles to become the inaugural World Heavyweight Champion. Fun match, but coming out of this, everyone was wondering how Triple H would treat this championship. Honestly, I thought no matter what it would still feel like a glorified mid-card title because nobody can beat Roman. But weeks went by and defense after defense. Rollins really made this feel on par with Roman's championship. At Night of Champions, Asuka also shockingly beat Bianca Belair, and I think this was the best call possible. The month prior at Backlash, fans were starting to turn on Bianca because she felt like Super Cena at that point. Taking the title off of her humanized her and her character has changed a bit, which is good because you never want a character or persona to stay stale and boring for a long period of time. The show also saw Trish Stratus pin Becky Lynch after an assist from a newly drafted Zoe Stark. After the draft, I was worried that these NXT draftees would be pushed to the side like they always are during the reign of Vince McMahon. But no. Hunter shows he really cares. Zoe being aligned with Trish in a main event feud against a star like Becky put her in a really good situation. Pretty Deadly is featured quite regularly and have been getting over with the crowd. Grayson Waller is on TV weekly, and is being trusted in segments with top talent like John Cena and Edge. Caden and Katana were shown as legit threats when they faced off against the dominant team of Ronda and Shayna. These just show that if Vince cared and put thought into the call-ups from years ago, we could have had way more stars and less people leaving the company. After Night of Champions, a lot of the championships received a redesign. We already saw the new World Heavyweight Championship, but to commemorate the 1,000 days of Roman Reigns as champion, he received a new version of the undisputed title. Asuka and Rhea Ripley would receive similar titles, and this was a good decision. During drafts and shakeups, a lot of those titles that were color-specific were hard to move around. Titles like these are easier to move around brands, and we won't have to see another belt swap again. During these weeks was also the lead-up to Money in the Bank. We saw qualifying matches every week leading up, but we also saw internal warfare between the Bloodline, which would be settled somewhat during their Civil War tag team match at the pay-per-view. The 2 Money in the Bank matches were won by Io Sky and Damian Priest. Vince would never. He doesn't know how to make new stars anymore. With one pay-per-view, Triple H just pushed 2 wrestlers into a path that could only reach stardom. I read a report a while back. Charlotte Flair was supposed to win the 2020 Women's Royal Rumble, and it was only changed that day to the new star and Bianca Belair because someone had to convince the boss and educate him on creating new stars. Who knows what would have happened to Bianca if nobody fought for her to win that day. Now imagine how many other people backstage simply couldn't change Vince's mind about other up-and-comers, the missed opportunities. Io and Damian winning proves you can always make new stars with proper booking. And that brings us to the present day. SummerSlam is approaching soon, and we've done a full circle, a full calendar year from when Triple H took over. To give a slight recap, the new era brought back many released fan favorites, more enjoyable pay-per-views, emphasis on international shows, less rematches, better Raw and SmackDowns, new stars and championships, better storytelling, rebrands, and much more. This past year showed me how good wrestling can get at its peak, something I haven't witnessed in a long time. I hope Triple H stays in power for a long time, and we continue to see a product like this on our televisions every week. Is there anything I missed from the Triple H era? Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.